Imagine owning an airline so glamorous that celebrities like Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe were frequently seen flying TWA. It was one of the first major carriers to operate the Boeing 747, so powerful that it connected continents when commercial aviation was still in its infancy. TWA was all of that. For 7 decades, Trans World Airlines wasn't just an airline, it was a cultural symbol, an American icon, the airline to the stars. And then, in 2001, it simply disappeared. But here's what few people know. TWA didn't die from lack of planes, routes, or customers. It was systematically destroyed by a toxic combination of corporate wars, a ruthless billionaire, and financial decisions that turned an empire into ash.
If you're also passionate about the world of aviation, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting our team.
The story begins in 1930 when transcontinental air transport merged with Western Air Express, creating TWA, Transcontinental and Western Air. Back then, flying was an absolute luxury. A ticket from New York to Los Angeles cost about $160, equivalent to more than $3,000 today. The journey took 36 hours with multiple stops, but TWA had a bold vision: to transform transcontinental air travel into something not just possible, but desirable. In the 1940s and 50s, TWA became synonymous with glamour. Flight attendants were treated like celebrities. The uniforms designed by famous stylists appeared on magazine covers. Howard Hughes, yes, that Howard Hughes, saw TWA not just as a company, but as an extension of Hollywood. And the numbers reflect this. In 1950, TWA carried more than 1 million passengers per year. By 1960, that number jumped to nearly 5 million. The company operated routes to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, something extraordinary for the time. TWA wasn't just big, it was prestigious, profitable, and apparently invincible. But as we'll see, empires don't crumble overnight. They crack slowly from the inside out. In 1939, Howard Hughes bought a controlling stake in TWA, and initially, this seemed like the best thing that could happen to the company. Hughes was obsessed with aviation. He didn't just want to own an airline, he wanted to build the future of aviation, and he had the money and vision to do it. Under Hughes, TWA ordered the first Lockheed Constellations, revolutionary aircraft that were faster, flew higher, and had greater range than anything at the time. These planes transformed TWA into a technological leader.
About that time, some fella back in the corner of the office there, he was sitting there with his feet up in the chair and had no pair of seersucker pants on and tennis shoes without any socks and an old dirty shirt. I'd seen his picture before. It was Howard Hughes.
But here's the thing, Hughes was as much a visionary as he was a chaotic micromanager. He insisted on personally approving every decision, from buying planes to the color of towels on the onboard service. Executives waited weeks for answers. Suppliers were left in limbo. The company, despite being innovative, was paralyzed by one man's indecision. And then things got worse. In the 50s, Hughes began to isolate himself. His eccentricities intensified. He rarely appeared, but he continued controlling everything from a distance through late-night phone calls and endless memos. In 1960, the situation reached a breaking point. The federal government and TWA's creditors filed a lawsuit forcing Hughes to sell his stake. The accusation? That his erratic control was harming the company and violating antitrust regulations. Hughes lost the legal battle in 1966. He was forced to sell his shares for $546 million, at the time the largest individual stock transaction in history. TWA was free, or at least it seemed to be. Freed from Hughes, TWA entered a phase of aggressive expansion in the 70s. The company invested heavily in Boeing 747s, the new jumbo jets that promised to revolutionize international travel. TWA inaugurated routes to Tel Aviv, Bombay, Hong Kong. It competed directly with Pan Am for the title of America's largest international airline. By 1978, TWA was carrying 20 million passengers per year. The fleet had more than 190 aircraft. Annual revenue exceeded $2 billion. But there were structural problems that nobody wanted to admit. The deregulation of aviation in 1978 changed everything.
Was flying a 707 one night where we went from San Francisco to LA. That segment made sense and you could sell tickets there. But the next segment was LA to Baltimore. And this flight was leaving late at night to arrive in Baltimore at 6 in the morning. And I remember on that particular flight, we had 3 people on board. This was a 707 that had north of 150 seats in the airplane. But that's where you flew, and the fare was set.
Suddenly, any company could fly any route. New low-cost competitors emerged overnight. Profit margins, previously comfortable, evaporated. Another factor was expanding too quickly. Many routes weren't profitable. Too many planes were bought with debts that now seemed impossible to pay. In 1985, TWA Flight 847 was hijacked by terrorists in the Mediterranean. The hijacking lasted 17 days. An American passenger was murdered. The images shocked the world and devastated TWA's safety reputation. Bookings plummeted. Passengers were afraid to fly TWA. The company lost millions. Now, you might be thinking, problems happen. Big companies recover, right? But TWA was about to face something much worse than terrorism or debt. It was about to meet Carl Icahn. In 1985, Carl Icahn, one of Wall Street's most aggressive corporate investors, saw an opportunity. TWA was fragile, the stock was cheap, and Icahn had a plan. He launched a hostile takeover bid for the company. Employees, pilots, and executives resisted, but in the end, Icahn won. He became TWA's controlling owner in 1986, buying the company for about $750 million. Icahn promised to modernize TWA, promised to make it profitable again, promised to protect jobs. But what he actually did was something very different. First, Icahn sold the most profitable parts of the company. TWA had maintenance contracts with other airlines, a stable source of revenue. Icahn sold that. The company had valuable international routes. Icahn sold or traded them for immediate cash. And then came the most destructive part, the Icahn deal. Here's how it worked. Icahn loaned money to TWA itself, money he had made by selling the company's assets. But the loan terms were absurd. TWA had to pay extremely high interest and more. If the company tried to restructure or declare bankruptcy, Icahn would have the right to receive huge payments first, before any other creditor. Essentially, Icahn created a system where he profited no matter what happened. If TWA survived, he received interest. If it went bankrupt, he received priority guarantees. Between 1986 and 1993, Icahn extracted more than $469 million from TWA through various financial schemes. Meanwhile, the company was drowning in unpayable debts. Pilots and employees saw salaries frozen or cut. Maintenance was reduced to a minimum. New planes? Forget it. TWA's fleet aged while competitors flew modern equipment.
TWA emerged from its first bankruptcy in 1993, leaner and restructured. Icahn finally left direct control, but his poisonous contracts remained. The company tried a renaissance, invested in marketing, renewed parts of the fleet, tried to recover the glamorous image. For a few years, it seemed to work. TWA even reported some profitable quarters. But then, on July 17, 1996, the ultimate tragedy occurred. TWA Flight 800, a Boeing 747 with 230 people aboard, took off from New York bound for Paris. 12 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft exploded in midair. Everyone died. The investigation lasted years. Conspiracy theories exploded. Attack, missile, sabotage. Eventually, the NTSB concluded that the cause was an explosion in the center fuel tank, probably caused by an electrical short circuit. But for TWA, the cause didn't matter. The tragedy destroyed what remained of public trust. Passengers feared flying TWA. Bookings plummeted 20% in the following months. The company tried to recover again, but each attempt was more desperate than the last. In 1995, TWA had 23,000 employees. By 1999, it had 18,000. Routes were canceled, hubs were closed. The company was in survival mode, not growth mode. And then, in 2001, TWA declared bankruptcy for the third time. This time, there was no possible recovery.
For TWA, this is a day of both excitement and sadness. Sadness because we're starting a process that will culminate in the retirement of the oldest and proudest name in U.S. airline industry. It is our hope that Americans can take what TWA has started and make it a little bit better.
In January 2001, American Airlines announced it would buy TWA's assets for approximately $500 million. But let's be clear, this wasn't a rescue, it was an absorption. American wanted TWA's routes, airport slots, some planes, but it didn't want the brand, the history, or the legacy. And it certainly didn't want to keep TWA as an independent entity. On December 1, 2001, the last flight operating with TWA identification took off, Flight 220, from Kansas City to Las Vegas. After landing, the crew made an emotional announcement. Many cried. 70 years of history ended there. Employees who had dedicated decades to the company saw the logo disappear overnight. Pilots who took pride in saying, "I fly for TWA," were now just numbers in an integration system. The iconic TWA terminal at JFK Airport, that futuristic architectural masterpiece designed by Eero Saarinen, was closed. For years, it sat abandoned, a ghost monument to something that was once glorious. TWA carried more than 500 million passengers throughout its existence. It employed hundreds of thousands of people. It pioneered routes, technologies, service standards. And then it simply ceased to exist. So what really destroyed TWA? It wasn't a single event. It was a sequence of decisions and circumstances that together created a perfect storm. But here's what makes the TWA story so frustrating. It didn't have to end this way. TWA was systematically suffocated, and when it finally couldn't breathe anymore, nobody wanted to save it. Just take advantage of what was left. The story of TWA is ultimately a story about how iconic companies can be destroyed not by lack of competence, passion, or loyalty, but by predatory finance and corporate decisions that prioritize immediate profit over long-term sustainability. It's a story about how a billionaire can legally dismantle one of aviation's most respected brands and walk away richer while thousands of loyal employees lose their jobs and pensions. Today, the TWA terminal at JFK Airport has been magnificently restored and transformed into a hotel. You can dine where movie stars waited for their flights. You can admire the futuristic architecture of the 1960s. You can even see a preserved Lockheed Constellation on site. But you can't fly TWA anymore, because that dream, that empire, that airline to the stars is dead.